short presentation on cornea called Just Cases. And I'm very sorry for the delay in start because of other commitments of the chair and moderators. And I would request the first presenter, Dr. Gauri, if she is available, please come over and start with the presentation.
Shall I start?
Yes, please go ahead, Dr. Gauri.
Good evening, everyone. So today I'm going to present my case on bandage contact lens plus glue in a case of perforated corneal ulcer. First, we shall briefly discuss about a BCL. So it is a soft contact lens which allows easy penetration of oxygen, water and drugs. Main aims of BCL are: it provides relief from pain, serves mechanical protection, seals small corneal perforations and corrects surface irregularities in irregular corneas. Other conditions in which BCLs can be used are eyelid abnormalities such as entropion, ectropion, trichiasis, ocular surface disorders, chemical injuries, dry eye, Stevens-Johnson syndrome, corneal surface disorders such as keratitis, bullous keratopathy. Glues used in ophthalmology. There are basically three types of glues: synthetic, biological and other cross-linkable polymers. Cyanoacrylate glue, which we used in our case, it is a type of synthetic glue that polymerizes rapidly when in contact with a wet surface. It is produced synthetically by condensation between cyanoacetic acid and a suitable alcohol. Other uses of cyanoacrylate glue mainly is corneal perforation. It also has proven antimicrobial properties. Corneal melts following exposure keratopathy, wound leaks, post-cataract surgeries, tarsorrhaphy in immobilized patients. There is also a fibrin glue, which is a biological adhesive which mimics the final stage of coagulation cascade. It can be used in recurrent pterygium patients, traumatic conjunctival tear repairs, mucus or amniotic membrane transplantation, corneal perforation and melts. The very advantage of replacing fibrin glue with cyanoacrylate lies in that it causes less post-operative inflammation, which in effect increases patient's comfort and reduces corneal vascularization. Furthermore, there is no need for removal of the glue. Now coming to my case, a 38-year-old female patient presented to our outpatient department with the chief complaints of pain, watering, redness and diminution of vision in right eye since 20 days. On examination, following findings were noted: visual acuity PL positive and PR inaccurate. Intraocular pressure was digitally very soft eyeball. In conjunctiva, circumcorneal congestion was noted. In cornea, there was a 3 mm perforated dry-looking corneal ulcer. Sedal's positive test was also noted. Anterior chamber was totally flat and adherent leucoma was present. So this is a picture, pre-treatment picture of the patient. Then the patient was started on topical antifungal drugs, broad-spectrum antibiotics, anti-glaucoma drugs, and dilating drugs. Finally, we applied cyanoacrylate glue at the site of perforation, then inserted BCL over it. So after 10 days follow-up, there was a decrease in size of ulcer. Sedal's negative test was observed and anterior chamber was well formed. Also, visual acuity returned to 6/60 and intraocular pressure with non-contact tonometer was 12 mm of Hg. So this is the video. So first of all, we have to fully dry the corneal ulcer. As glue cannot be applied on wet surface, then we apply cyanoacrylate glue. Just 1 to 2 drops is sufficient. Then we wait for 30 seconds to 1 minute so that the glue polymerizes. So after glue is polymerized, we'll carefully place the BCL over it. After placing the BCL, we will patch the eye for 4 to 6 hours and the eye can be opened after 4 to 6 hours and topical treatment can be started. Next. So this is the post-treatment picture 5 days later. This is the photo of patient after 10 days of procedure. Um, this is a slit lamp recording of anterior chamber fully formed. And reduced size of corneal ulcer is noted. Also serials test was also performed, which was negative. On coming on to conclusion, so glue plus BCL is a very effective treatment modality in patients of corneal perforation, as it is cost effective, non-invasive, easy to perform, and also patient friendly. These novel developing adhesive promises to overcome the drawbacks and risks associated with the existing ones, such as sutures, which causes infiltration, ocular irritation, patching, which increases microbial contamination, non-compliance for drug installation timely. The increasing acceptance of these adhesives by clinicians promises this to be a standard procedure for surgical wound closure. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Gauri. And could you please specify the applicator that you're using for glue application?
Sir, actually, I used the back side of an arrow bud. So it is not a particular instrument, but at that time that was only available. So we use that only in our OPD.
Isn't there a possibility of mismatch between the size of the defect and the size of the applicator?
No, sir. We just apply the glue, and we apply the glue all over the area where the perforation is present. So there is not a chance of missing the perforation.
Thank you very much. Any questions from the audience? Or we go ahead to the next presenter, Dr. Sonam, if she's here. And the speakers are requested to please follow the time limit. Thank you. Dr. Sonam, please.
Very good evening, everyone. I'm going to discuss a couple of cases with having multimodal imaging in brittle corneal syndrome. So brittle corneal syndrome is a ultra-rare disorder. It is an autosomal recessive condition which involves the connective tissue, and it is presented usually with extreme thinning and fragility of the cornea. It's a complex condition with limited treatment options, and the genetic mutations responsible are ZNF469 and PRDM5 mutations. So our first case was this 4-year-old boy who was born out of a consanguineous marriage. He presented to our clinic following trauma to his left eye with a plastic flow. It was a trivial trauma, and he had undergone primary surgical repair, and he was otherwise a preterm child with no history of any history of surgery in the past, and his elder sibling was diagnosed with primary congenital glaucoma and was on anti-glaucoma medication since birth. On examination, the child was highly uncooperative, and the best corrected visual acuity, that was roughly 624 in the right eye and 660 in the left eye. Here we can see in the right eye there's bluish in the gross examination there's bluish discoloration of the sclera. Along with that, there is thin, a well-formed AC with a clear cornea in the right eye, while in the left eye we have inferior corneal scarring with some sutures. On doing his pentacam, we could see the extremely thin corneas with a thinnest pachymetry of 232 in the right eye and 129 microns in the left eye, without any posterior elevation, ruling out keratoconus. So fundus evaluation also did not reveal any specific problem. We did see on a gross physical examination there was dolichocephaly, which is noticed in the child as well as his father. Other than that, the parents' ocular examination was within normal limits. So we decided to go for genetic testing, keeping in mind the blue sclera and the dolichocephaly finding and thin corneas. So he was found to have ZNF469 autosomal recessive mutation, which is suggestive of brittle corneal syndrome type 1. So the family was counseled for further evaluation in the form of ENT consultation, because these children are known to have highly elastic and mobile tympanic membrane, leading to conductive hearing loss as well, which was normal in this child, and protective polycarbonate glasses were advised. Along with that, we was also advised to avoid contact sports. Along with that, we even asked the family members to bring his sibling also for examination. So he subsequently underwent secondary IOL implantation in the left eye, because which was aphakic post-injury, and caution was practiced during procedure, because we had to tell the general anesthesiologist not to apply any undue pressure on the cornea, because even a trivial pressure on the cornea may lead to a rupture as well, and we also ensure that all the ports were sutured. But to our disappointment, 6 months later the child presented to us again with trauma to the other eye. That also was a very trivial trauma. He was just writing with a pencil, and I think the other end of the pencil, like with the eraser, just hit his eye and he had a perforation. The parents took a little longer, like they took a week to reach to us. So ultimately this required a patch graft, and we sent the tissue for histopathological examination, which showed a markedly thinned out cornea with a thickness which was similar to our pentacam finding, that is around 126 microns. But the epithelium, endothelium, Bowman's membrane was otherwise normal with a few foamy stromal changes on all stains. That is, this is the Congo red stain, the mesenteric stain, PAS stain, and Alcian blue. Then coming to the, because the child had this hyperactivity, we even got him evaluated by the psychiatrist, who diagnosed him to have features of hyperactivity going in the ADHD spectrum. On last follow-up, where we can see that there's presence of a patch graft, clear patch graft and clear cornea, and the other has a well-centered IOL, and his visual acuity finally was 624 and 618 with normal intraocular pressures. On doing a sibling screening, as I told you that he was diagnosed with PC, primary congenital glaucoma, his EUA notes in the past revealed the pressure was normal with a diameter of only 11.5 mm in both eyes. Because his corneas were too prominent, I think they thought that it was PCG. So on coming to his examination, he also had bluish sclera. On doing a pentacam, he also had thin corneas, but his corneal thickness was above 300 microns. So that could be the reason why he did not have any corneal perforation or any trivial trauma to the, after trivial trauma. So the main purpose of this presentation was to say that we must keep the diagnosis of brittle cornea also in children who are basically presenting to us with trivial trauma, and misdiagnosis as primary congenital glaucoma is also present because of the steep corneas, and also getting them the psychiatric evaluation, because these children who are who have ADHD could be more prone to trauma, and protective eyewear is again advised in such children. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sonam. And one more query from our side is that with ADHD spectrum and this being prone to trivial trauma, how are we supposed to give, other than this protective specs, some lubricants or bandage contact lenses are any option?
So actually bandage contact lenses would again predispose the child to trauma, because anything like a trivial trauma to the eye can lead to perforations. They are very fragile corneas, and if we advise them bandage contact, that's why the BCL is basically not advised in such cases.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Dr. Ananya, please, with the presentation.
Good evening, everyone. I'll be presenting on a case of bilateral LSCD managed by a two-stage approach of K-Pro and minor salivary gland transplantation. So coming to my case report, there was a 25-year-old male patient who had presented to our OPD with chief complaints of diminution of vision in both the eyes, with the left eye being more than the right eye, and the right eye vision being PLPR positive and the left eye being PL negative, which was progressive and gradual in the nature since 2 years, and it was associated with redness, foreign body sensation, and pain. Patient doesn't give any history of sticky discharge, ocular trauma, or any chemical injury. On slit lamp examination, both the eyes showed circumcorneal congestion with conjunctivization of the entire cornea and loss of palisades of Vogt. In the right eye, there was corneal neovascularization with 1 by 1 mm epithelial defect seen paracentrally around 10 o'clock, and there was fibrovascular pannus present 360 degrees, and in the left eye, the AC contents were not appreciated. Coming to the investigations, SAC was patent in both the eyes, IOP was digitally normal, general and systemic examination was normal, all the routine blood examinations were also normal. On the P-scan, there was no abnormality seen, and on Schirmer's test, we saw that the both eyes were having moderate dry eye. So a provisional diagnosis of both eye severe stem cell deficiency was made, and the right eye keratoprothesis with limbal stem cell transplantation procedure was planned initially, followed by buccal mucosal transplantation done 2 weeks later. So the patient was started on systemic antibiotics with analgesics with multivitamins, and locally he was started on the moxie plus dexamethasone eye drops 6 times with preservative-free lubricant teardrops 1 hourly, Lacryl gel 4 times, and Bremolol eye drops HS for 15 days. And on the day of the surgery, our keratoprosthesis, that is Oro-K-Pro, was assembled with the help of donor cornea, punch, backplate, optic, and titanium ring with assembly device. So for our surgery, a 7.5 mm trephine was used in the recipient cornea, and some of the incarcerated iris tissue was removed with the cataractous lens, and we also saw that the posterior lens capsule was kept intact, so we didn't do any vitrectomy, and the patient was kept aphakic. Coming to the next part, that is we used the assembled keratoprosthesis, which was sutured to the donor cornea with the 10-0 ethanol sutures, and a total of 16 sutures were taken. Also, limbal graft transplantation was done with the donor cornea, and B-cell was placed over the K-Pro graft. On POD1, the vision was HMCA PL PR positive, and the graft sutures were intact with no exudates or any gaping. The B-cell and the K-Pro were in place. After 2 weeks, the vision improved to finger counting close to face, and the posterior segment was also normal on IDO examination. And now the patient was planned to undergo the buccal mucosal transplantation. So for this, we used from patient's lower lip a graft of 2.5 by 2.5 buccal mucosa, which was comprising of salivary glands along with the ducts, and it was placed in the superior fornix and sutured with the surrounding conjunctiva. After putting BCL, we also did a temporary lateral tarsorrhaphy. On a 2-week follow-up, the vision was finger counting close to face, and the tear film also started to improve, with the tear meniscus being seen at the lower fornix. Also, the graft was becoming more integrated with the surrounding conjunctiva. But on POD 30, we saw a thin white colored membrane seen in the pupillary area, because of which the patient underwent Nd:YAG laser membranectomy, later giving vision of finger counting 2 meters. But this membrane kept on recurring, so now the patient is being planned for AC wash. And also additionally, we have started patient on cyclosporin eye drop 6 times. So these are the take-home points, which is that the keratoprosthesis forms the last resort for bilateral end-stage ocular surface disorder, like in our case of bilateral severe LSCD. Also, the choice of K-Pro depends on various factors like tear films, like the tear film status and the etiology. So in our case, my patient had moderate dry eye. That's why we used type 1 K-Pro. And we also need to have a long-term commitment towards like follow-up, like to change BCL every time. Thank you.
Very interesting case, Dr. Nanya, but I think when you started with the pre-operative medication, cyclosporin addition pre-operatively could have been a better option, and that would have reduced post-operative inflammation, necessitating your membranectomy and AC wash also. So I think with these cases, with such heavy vascularization, it is imperative to be using antimetabolites and medications like cyclosporin pre-operatively at least a week to 10 days earlier, so that post-operative complications are minimized. Thank you for the presentation. And if Dr. Anagha is available, she is welcome to present.
Good evening, I'm Dr. Anaga Chalit and I'm going to present a case titled Better Late Than Never, a rare case of a 10-year-old anterior segment foreign body. So what happens when a simple workplace injury goes untreated for a decade? Can vision still be saved after such a long delay? Let's find out. A decade of silence, the case of a forgotten foreign body. So meet our patient. He is a 52-year-old male painter who complained of diminution of vision in the left eye since 5 years. The initial injury occurred 10 years ago, where the patient sustained left eye ocular trauma with a GI wire while at work. 5 years post-trauma, he started noticing a decline in vision in the left eye, for which no medical consultation was sought. At presentation, that is 10 years later, he came to the OPD presenting with severe diminution of vision in the left eye. So here you can see a seal limbal tear at 11 o'clock position with the peripheral iris tissue into the wound, as well as the foreign body, which is the metal wire entering the anterior chamber, and also a traumatic total cataract. And our post-dilated examination revealed traumatic total cataract with no view of the fundus. So the provisional diagnosis was left eye seal limbal tear and traumatic total cataract with the retained anterior chamber foreign body. The scan was found to be normal. So what was our plan of action? Immediate foreign body removal along with a lens extraction. So an 8 mm SICS tunnel was initially created to access the foreign body. However, the orientation of the foreign body coupled with the extensive adhesions to the iris made extraction through the tunnel very difficult, and after multiple attempts, we removed the foreign body through the original wound itself. And upon successful removal, a 2 mm limbal defect was noted, and I'll talk about that later. Finally, the cataractous lens was extracted. So after foreign body removal, we were faced with the challenge of managing the 2 mm limbal defect. Several options were considered, such as a TA with BCL, but this was not considered as it can cause vascularization and ultimately compromise corneal clarity. Our next option was a corneal or scleral patch graft, but since the defect was very small, we did not choose this because it would be excessive for our situation. Finally, we went ahead with the Tennant's patch graft. So this was our 2 mm limbal defect, and the graft was harvested from the inferior conjunctiva and placed over our limbal defect and sutured with overlay sutures. So at post-op day 1, we had a vision of CF half meters, which is improving to 6.6 partial with a plus 10D lens, and we planned for a secondary IOL implantation at a later date. So fast forward to 3 months later, we had done a secondary IOL implantation, and post-op best corrected visual acuity was 6.6 surprisingly, and here also we can see that the Tennant's patch graft is well accepted. So in a year in India, around 37 lakh people sustain ocular traumas. So why is our case rare? One, because it's a long-standing trauma of 10 years with no major complications, which is exceptionally rare finding in ophthalmology. And also, we have an innovative surgical approach in this, where on-table decision to use a Tennant's patch graft was done, thus preserving ocular integrity. And the most important thing is remarkable visual recovery for this patient, which is every surgeon's wish and prayer, which luckily came true for our patient. Thank you for your patient listening.
Nice presentation, Dr. Anaga, and like you already mentioned, during the course of your surgery, you were forced to remove the foreign body through the initial tract only.
Yes.
So whenever foreign bodies are older by weeks or days, it's always better to go through the original wound itself, because the foreign body has created a lot of fibrosis around the tract.
Yes, sir.
And it's difficult to mobilize the foreign body in any meridian or direction other than the tract.
Yes, sir.
It's difficult to mobilize within the tract itself, but then other than the tract, because of fibrosis around the tract, it's difficult to mobilize it in any other way. So it's always better to remove the foreign body through the tract itself that it has created. And I think the luck factor in favor of the patient was that the GI wire was an alloy wire. And
Yes, yes,
therefore, there was no diffusion of free metal into the eye, leading to any metallic foreign body retained foreign body complications.
Yes, sir.
And two, maybe the ends were blunt because of instrumentation or whatever, so that it didn't pierce the iris tissue and go beyond the lens.
Yes.
So I think those two factors are there which prompted the tilted the luck in favor of the patient. Thank you very much. Dr. Sonali, if she is available. No. And Dr. Sheetal. No. Dr. Kaveri. Yes, please, Dr. Kaveri. Dr. Sonali and Dr. Sheetal are on.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Kaveri from Lady Harding Medical College. I'm a first year postgraduate. I'm here to present a case on the management of fungal keratitis with impending perforation by Penicillium species in a tertiary care hospital. This is the case of a 50-year-old male farmer from Shamli, Uttar Pradesh, who presented to our OPD with the pain, redness, and sudden diminution of vision in the left eye for 5 days. The pain and redness in the left eye were progressive and they were not relieved by the over-the-counter drops that the patient took. He also gives a history of visible whiteness of the cornea, which progressed over time, covering the entire cornea within 5 days, and which made the patient intolerant to light. He gives a history of, he gave a negative history for any possible predisposing factors, and systemically is not immunocompromised. The vision was hand movement close to face with accurate PR. The ocular examination also showed left eye mild swelling with diffuse conjunctival and circumcorneal congestion. The cornea had an infiltrate with irregular margins, and the surface was rough, and the infiltrate was yellowish white in color. The slit lamp examination also revealed a desmetocele in the center. The AC details were not visible, and the sclera's view was also obscured by the congested conjunctiva. A diagnosis of left eye fungal keratitis with impending perforation was made, and left eye therapeutic TPK under guarded visual prognosis was planned. Corneal scraping was deferred in view of impending perforation. The patient was started on empirical treatment when he reported to us. The routine blood investigations were sent, after which he was started on topical and oral voriconazole, and the patient was posted for surgery the next day after the donor cornea was made available. The 2 trolleys were prepared, one for infected corneal debulking, the second for donor corneal trephination and transplanting. 270 degrees conjunctival peritomy was done. The center of the host cornea was marked with the help of an RK marker, and the host cornea was trephined partially. The corneal button was removed using Dr. Vajpayee's debulking technique. All the edges of host cornea suspicious of necrosis were removed, and the prelenticular membrane, which was also noticed, was also removed. The donor cornea was a grade B cornea, was placed and was sutured to the eye. The AC was maintained, and the patient was shifted out of the OT in a stable condition. The corneal sample that we received was divided into half, and half of it was sent for histopath. The rest half was sent for bacterial and fungal culture. The various tests from microbiology showed confirmed the organism to be Penicillium species. Post-operative day 1, the vision was hand movement close to face with accurate PR. The AC was well maintained. The graft clarity was 3+. The lens and the other AC details were still not visible. The patient was discharged in 2 days on systemic and topical antifungals, cycloplegics and antiglaucomas. The take-home message for this case was fungal infections are to be suspected in a case of contact with vegetative matter. Empirical treatment is to be started if corneal scrapings could not be done. Timely intervention can save the globe if not the vision, and can prevent the eye to go into phthisis. To be able to save the vision of a patient, encourage eye donations. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kaveri. Dr. Khyati? No show. Dr. Siddhi, please. Dr. Khyati.
Good afternoon everyone. Today I am Dr. Siddhi and I will be presenting a case of Achromobacter keratitis in an immunocompetent host. So we had a 27-year-old female who was a soft contact lens wearer, presented with 3 months history of right eye gradually increasing white spot on the cornea gradual progressive painful diminution of vision associated with redness and photophobia. She was a regular contact lens wearer with no history of swimming with contact lens on and no history of washing contact lens with water. She has no known systemic or any significant past or family history. She was diagnosed as a right eye stromal keratitis outside the hospital, and for which she was already on fortified vancomycin eye drops, atropine eye drops, and ciprofloxacin eye drops. She was compliant but not responding to the existing treatment. On ocular examination, her vision in the right eye was finger counting at 1 meter, which was not improving with the pinhole. There was a lid swelling with no lag ophthalmos, and IOP was digitally normal. Coming to a slit lamp examination, there was a central corneal opacity with infiltrate measuring about 4.2 to 3.2 mm in size, covering full thickness of the stroma, and 2 mm of mobile hypopyon was also noted. So coming to the management, we sent her, we did her corneal infiltrate and sent for the repeat corneal scraping for microbiology smear and culture. Also contact lens culture was sent. The bacterial and fungal sensitivity showed no growth. However, the Achromobacter xyloxidans species was isolated from the contact lens culture, which was susceptible to imipenem, meropenem, and intermediate susceptibility to cotrimoxazole. So based on the susceptibility, we started her on fortified meropenem eye drops 1% every hourly and atropine eye drops 2 times a day. She was kept on the regular follow-up and monitoring. So on the next follow-up, 10 days later, her right eye corneal infiltrate decreased in size with evidence of temporal scarring. Also, there was improvement in the vision noted. The 2 weeks after starting the antibiotic eye drops, we added a prednisolone 1% eye drop 6 times a day in a tapering dose, and the reduction in the fortified meropenem eye drop frequency. In her next follow-up, there was further decrease in the size of infiltrate was noted. However, in the once she saw the improvement in the symptoms, she lost to follow-up, and she stopped using fortified meropenem eye drops, and there was a drop in the vision and increase in the size of corneal infiltrate associated with superficial and deep vascularization. Then again we sent a repeat bacterial culture and restarted her on the fortified meropenem eye drops. On her last follow-up, there was a right eye vision improved to 624, and with pinhole it improved to the 612. There was a well-defined vascularized scar covering the pupillary axis, but there was no active infiltrate, so she was advised to stop all medicines. So coming to the differential diagnosis, atypical bacterial and fungal keratitis, acanthamoeba keratitis, viral keratitis, and corneal scarring with history of viral keratitis. So coming to the discussion, it is an Achromobacter is an aerobic, gram-negative, rod-shaped, cytochrome oxidase positive, non-fermenting bacteria. The risk factors are corneal graft, contact lens wear, post-LASIK, and topical steroid use. This pathogen is reported to be resistant to most of the aminoglycoside. But these antibiotics are included in the mostly in the empirical treatment in the cases of bacterial keratitis. Similarly, in our case, the fortified vancomycin and ciprofloxacin eye drops were started, which showed no improvement in the symptoms. So take-home message, this case report highlights the importance of repeat sampling in case of non-healing culture-negative corneal ulcer. And Achromobacter is an indolent deep-seated ulcer. Although it is a rare, it should be taken into consideration of the ulcers which are non-responding to the empirical topical treatment. Thank you.
Very rare case presentation by Dr. Siddhi. And can you please suggest any other medications to be used in atypical presentations on empirical basis other than vancomycin, which didn't work, or ciprofloxacin?
Meropenem, imipenem.
How did we prepare meropenem? Because that's not available topically?
Yeah, it is. You
Okay.
need to prepare.
And I saw that in your regimen you were not using any lubricants also.
Yeah, initially actually the frequency of drop was more, so we did not add lubricants because anyway we
But I
prepared
think
45.
adding lubricants to the treatment regimen should always be considered, because surface dryness is predisposing to poor wound healing and poor tissue healing. So lubricants should be there, I think. If compliance is an issue with reference to frequency of medication, then long-acting lubricants should be added. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Karan? Dr. Karan Bhatia? Dr. Saranya Viswas? Dr. Bhavna? Dr. Akshata? Please. Dr. Akshata, please.
Good evening, everybody. So I'll be presenting a case of bilateral immune keratitis, prevention before perforation. Peripheral corneal ulceration or peripheral ulcerative keratitis is usually a crescent-shaped destructive inflammation of gestalimbal corneal stroma. It presents with epithelial defect, presence of stromal infiltratory cells, progressive stromal degradation and thinning. Collagen vascular diseases are responsible for approximately half of non-infectious causes of PUK. A clinical presentation, a 52-year-old female was referred to us from respiratory medicine as the patient complained of diminution of vision in both eyes, watering, foreign body sensation and intolerance to light for 2 weeks. Known case of diabetes and hypertension since 20 years. Known case of rheumatoid arthritis, discontinued medications 15 years ago. Admitted currently for breathlessness, under evaluation for obstructive airway disorder. On examination, visual acuity in the right eye was counting finger 1 meter and the left eye was counting finger 3 meters. Lids and conjunctiva was normal. Cornea, bilaterally, we could see in the first picture I can see stromal thinning noted inferior temporal quadrant in both the eyes. Peripheral corneal infiltrates were noted 2 mm from the limbus circumferentially, and subepithelial punctate erosions were also noted on day 1. So on day 6, the peripheral corneal infiltrates we could see resolving, they were resolving, and also stromal thinning was still noted in the inferior temporal quadrant. On day 16th, again we could see FS staining positive and they were resolving SPKs, and resolving peripheral infiltrates were seen. As we can see that the cornea is clear now. On day 26, the resolving peripheral infiltrates were seen, and there was also corneal reepithelialization was seen in the area where the corneal thinning was noted. Coming to fundus examination, media is hazy in both eyes, cup-disc ratio was normal, peripapillary area was normal in both eyes, blood vessels were attenuated, macula FR was dull. Dry eye evaluation, Schirmer's test, in the right eye it was 4 mm and in the left eye it was 5 mm. T-Bud test was less than 3 seconds in both the eyes. Clinical presentation, there was a swan neck deformity seen and ulnar deviation of metacarpophalangeal joint, and rheumatoid nodules were noted. Investigations, CBC was normal, whereas ESR was raised 88 mm per hour and RBS was 280 mg per dl. Rest RA factor, ANA profile, sputum sample was negative for Mycobacterium tuberculosis and MON2 was negative. Management, the patient was managed with Gatiflox plus prednisolone eye drops for 2 weeks, 6 times. Sodium hyaluronate eye drops were used. Cyclosporium eye drops was given BD. Lacrygal eye ointment was used. Home atropine 0.03% eye drops was used. Tablet doxycycline was used and tapered. It was first BD and then OD. The immunologist started on tablet methotrexate 10 mg once a week and hydrochloroquinone 250 mg BD. Conclusion, PUK is a vision-threatening condition that requires prompt treatment to stabilize the cornea. Don't wait until tomorrow to intervene. A multidisciplinary approach to investigations and management is required with collaboration with various specialists. Patient rightly diagnosed and timely treated can show response to treatment. Thank you.
Good presentation, Dr. Akshata. And one query is that with this presentation of severe dry eye, can anything else be done to prevent this PUK from happening by the ophthalmologist per se? In terms of multi-specialty approach, that is okay. The case was referred from TBRD itself.
Yes.
But primary prevention of PUK in severe dry eye.
Excessive lubrication can be given to the patient.
Okay. And we can see from pictures there is a significant grade 3 nuclear sclerosis cataract.
Yes, NST.
So the patient would need cataract surgery. Any precautions that you would then take when you take up the patient for surgery? A case of known dry eye with PUK healed.
Cyclosporins would be started with excessive lubrication first to stabilize the patient, and later once the patient condition stables and corneal reepithelialization is noted, we can take her up for surgery, sir.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Akshata. Dr. Rukaiya? No show. Dr. Madhumita?
Hello everyone, good evening sir, good evening everyone. Today I will be presenting a case on application of the smile lenticule in a corneal tear repair. So I am hereby presenting a case history of 34-year-old male patient who came to our OPD with the chief complaints of sudden diminution of vision in his right eye associated with watering, pain, redness and foreign body sensations in 2 hours. Basically he inflicted an injury upon the right eye 2 hours ago while cutting an iron sheet. So on examination, we see that the visual acuity was 20/40 in the affected eye and the left eye was normal. On slit lamp examination, we saw that there was a deep intrastromal foreign body which was tucked at 1 o'clock position in paracentral area with the surrounding mild stromal haze. And also anterior chamber showed 2+ cells and flare was seen. Pupillary reaction was normal in both direct and consensual. Anterior segment OCT was done, which was suggested that deep foreign body was present with a tear. So now the plan of action was, he underwent a corneal tear foreign body removal with a corneal suturing and a cyanoacrylate glue was applicated. BCL was also placed. On post-op day 1, the anterior chamber was well formed, with the sutures are intact. BCL was also present. We started on topical steroid antibiotic combination and lubricants drops. BCL was replaced on 5th day, but then on 14th day it was removed. CDLS was negative at that time. He was called for follow-ups in between. The retina was also examined and it was normal and was doing very well. After 3 months, suture removal was done, but it was seen that the CDLS test was positive. There was a leak and the anterior chamber was also shallow. ASOCT was done, which was suggestive that suture removal, wound gapping. So now on the same day, what we did, it was a repair of the wound with the help of a smile lenticule with the fibrin glue. Next day, post-operatively, patient was doing extremely well as shown in the picture. The glue was present along with the smile lenticule. There was no leakage notice and AC was also well formed. Anterior segment OCT was done, which was suggesting that complete approximation of the tear. So to conclude that refractive lens extraction, smile is the main refractive procedure in the most of the hospitals and being performed in large numbers for correction of myopia. So the availability of ample amount of lenticular tissues are available. So the use of the corneal lenticules may be a safe and effective surgical alternative for corneal perforation closure with the potential clinical application as relatively simple and inexpensive measures. There are various publications also been done in past suggesting that lenticule pars graft is a safe and feasible surgical option for the management of microperforations and complicated corneal tears, especially in hospitals that perform a smile procedure in large numbers. So it is suggested that the stromal lenticule which we get can be used with its biocompatibility and sufficient strength, ease of handling at low cost, and is a useful patch graft for different purposes in ophthalmic field. These are my references. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Madhumita, and it was a very nice presentation with reference to novel use of a readily available corneal lenticule, especially with high refractive surgery output cases, hospitals. And one question would still be there after lenticule has been secured.
Yes.
What is the need for putting BCL glue? I think BCL with the lenticule should be good enough.
Yes, sir. With that also, either we can put a so that the lenticule doesn't move and doesn't cause any problems, sir. That's why glues.
And I think out of 7 presentations that we have had, rather 8, 3 were of small perforations, 2 by foreign bodies. So I think the scope and need for educating our patients about eye trauma and use of protective eyewear at work is of paramount importance, so that we do not encounter these patients again and again, same in others.
Yes,
So I think the presenters must include in their final advice that
Yes,
the
sir.
patients were advised about using protective eyewear
Protective
at work,
glasses at work. Yes, sir.
and that would be a great service to the society, I would say.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. And Dr. Vardhan, any comments, please?
I think all the cases were beautifully presented, very unique in their nature, and thank you to sir for sharing his pearls from the vast experience. The only thing that we were, unfortunately, we had to see was there were a lot of absentees, and that is what I think should not happen
Yes, definitely.
next time, because this is a submitted program, and all the young ophthalmologists have submitted this. But nevertheless, I think all the people who have presented have actually chosen very nice, very unique cases, very confidently presented, very scientifically presented, and that is the main aim of such sessions in midterm. So congratulations to everybody.
Of course, the presentations were good, the residents were quite confident, and I think other than the time limit being exceeded time and again, the presentations were definitely very good. The rarity element and the novelty element and the element of surprise with reference to presentation and with reference to the management was there, and we thoroughly enjoyed, and I'm sure we have had take-home messages about these cases, and thank you all.
Yeah.
Good luck.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, everybody.